because, ultimately, this is not a political game. This is really something that affects people in the most personal ways. My friend, Natoma Kenfield, is here in the front row. Some of you heard Natoma's story before, where a cancer survivor who, because she had now a pre-existing condition, was faced with either keeping her health insurance at such a high rate, the only way she could get health insurance with a pre-existing condition was to basically pay so much that she could no longer afford to pay the mortgage on her house. And I remember her writing to me, and I thought, that could be my mom. That could be yours. And that's not a choice that people should have to make. And when most people, even if they're not Obama supporters, hear Natoma's story or the stories of other people who have been helped, they know it's wrong to just take away their health care. And it becomes less about who's winning here in Washington. It becomes about how are we doing right by our fellow Americans. But those stories have to be heard. And I would just encourage people to start telling their stories. And tell their stories. You're not always going to get a lot of attention here in Washington. Because they want to know this vote and this insult that was hurled back and forth between whoever. But you know what, tell that story in your local newspapers. Talk to your local reporters, congregations that are involved in caring for those in need. Make sure that you're telling stories in church and in services so that people know. Because the one thing that I'm convinced about is the American people want to do the right thing. It's hard to get good information, and unless you're reading Vox every day, which is hard to do. Mr. Klein, it's not that hard to do. President Obama, getting the details of all this policy is hard. It's complicated. You don't know what's true, you don't know what's not true. I mean, those folks in Kentucky that you've signed up, there are a lot of people who voted for not just a president. But also for a member of Congress who said, explicitly, we're going to eliminate this. Well, I understand why people might think, okay, well. He's going to eliminate it, but he will give us something better. But this is hard. And what you don't want is a situation where they make a promise that they can't keep. And I've worked on this a long time. If we had had a better way to do this, we would have done it. It would have been in my interest to do it, because I knew I was going to be judged on whether or not it worked. And those areas that don't work had to do with their not. Being enough money in the system and not having a public option. And I'm more than happy to put those fixes in place, anytime, any place. But that's not, so far, what the Republicans are proposing. You deserve to know what it is that they're doing. So, anyway, I appreciate you guys taking the time to tell the story. Mr. Klein, real quick, Sarah had asked about your role going forward. President Obama, oh, my role going forward? Well, look, I mean, I do deserve a little sleep. You know, Michelle's dad had multiple sclerosis MS but was part of that generation that. Just didn't have a lot of expectations about healthcare and so just kind of suffered for years. I mean, those are our stories. So it's not like I'm going to suddenly fade away on this. I will be a part of the work of our fellow citizens in trying to make sure that the wealthiest, country on earth is able to do the same thing that every other advanced country is able to do. I mean, it's not as if this has never been done before. If you're in Canada, you got healthcare, no matter who you are. If you're in France, you got healthcare. If you're in England, you got healthcare. If you're in Australia, you got healthcare. If you're in New Zealand, you got healthcare. I remember talking to my friend, John Key, who was the Prime Minister of New Zealand. He is part of the Conservative Party in New Zealand. And he said to me in the middle of this healthcare debate, he said, "Boy, if I proposed that we took away people's healthcare, that we repealed it, I'd be run out of office by my own party." So I'll be working with all of you. But my voice is going to be less important than the voices of people who are directly affected. And so I would urge everybody to make your voice heard. Now is the time to do it. The people who have opposed this were opposing it not based on facts. But were opposing it based on sort of an ideological concern about expansion on the state. And taxes on wealthier people that are helping people who don't have as much money. And I respect their role in the democracy. They've been really fighting hard. Well, folks here got to fight just as hard. My final piece of advice would be to the news media, which is, generally speaking, when Obamacare has worked well, it wasn't attributed to Obamacare, and when there were problems they got front page headlines. And I think that, hopefully, now is a time where people can be a little. This doesn't apply to Vox, by the way. Even on this whole premium increase issue that happened right before the election, it is true, as I said. That insurers adjusted and hiked premiums. But I kept on trying to explain, number one, if you're getting a tax subsidy, this wasn't going to affect your out-of-pocket costs because the tax credit would just go up. But nobody kind of heard that. And number two, these increases in premiums only applied to people who were buying health insurance on the exchanges. In fact, 85% of the people don't get health insurance through Obamacare. And for you, your health care premiums actually have gone up a lot less. Since Obamacare was passed than they did before Obamacare was passed. The average family has probably saved about $3,000 in lower health care premiums than if you had seen those same healthcare cost trends increase at the pace that they did before the law was passed. But I didn't see a lot of headlines about that, which I understand. I mean, because it's not controversial enough, or it's a little bit too complicated to get in a sound bite. So that's why the individual voice is so important. And that's why I'm so appreciative of journalists who actually know what they're talking about. Mr. Klein, thank you, Mr. President. Barack Obama. Back to school speech at Wakefield High School. Delivered September 8, 2009, Arlington, Virginia. Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. All right, everybody go ahead and have a seat. How is everybody? Doing today? How about Tim Spicer? I am here with students at Wakefield High School in Arlington, Virginia. And we've got students tuning in from all across America, from kindergarten through 12th grade. And I am just so glad that all could join us today. And I want to thank Wakefield for being such an outstanding host. Give yourselves a big round of applause. I know that for many of you, today is the first day of school. And for those of you in kindergarten, or starting middle or high school, it's your first day in a new school, so it's understandable if you're a little nervous. I imagine there are some seniors out there who are feeling pretty good right now with just one more year to go. And no matter what grade you're in, some of you are probably wishing it were. Still summer and you could have stayed in bed just a little bit longer this morning. I know that feeling. When I was young, my family lived overseas. I lived in Indonesia for a few years. And my mother, she didn't have the money to send me where all the American kids went to school. But she thought it was important for me to keep up with an American education. So she decided to teach me extra lessons herself, Monday through Friday. But because she had to go to work, the only time she could do it was at 4:30 in the morning. Now, as you might imagine, I wasn't too happy about getting up that early. And a lot of times, I'd fall asleep right there at the kitchen table. But whenever I'd complain, my mother would just give me one of those looks and she'd say, "This is no picnic for me either, Buster." So I know that some of you are still adjusting to being back at school. But I'm here today because I have something important to discuss with you. I'm here because I want to talk with you about your education. And what's expected of all of you in this new school year. Now, I've given a lot of speeches about education. And I've talked about responsibility a lot. I've talked about teachers' responsibility for inspiring students and pushing you to learn.